What happens when the most powerful cocaine cartel in the world decides selling directly to New York street dealers is more profitable than going through Italian families that controlled drug distribution for 40 years? When Colombian traffickers who move tons through Miami think they can bypass 5 families' distribution network and keep all profits, and when John Gotti discovers Medellín Cartel operatives have been flooding New York streets with cheap cocaine for 6 months, undercutting Gambino prices and cutting family out of most profitable drug trade in America. This is story of meeting in February 1988, and why Colombians learned that controlling product doesn't mean controlling market, and that access to New York's 8 million customers costs $100,000 monthly, whether you like it or not. February 1988. New York City. Cocaine trade exploding across America. Miami was entry point. Colombian cartels shipped tons through Florida, distributed north to major cities. New York was crown jewel, biggest market, highest prices, wealthiest customers. For decades, cocaine reaching New York came through specific chain. Colombian suppliers sold to Italian mob in Florida. Families transported north, distributed through networks of dealers, clubs, streets. Everyone took cut. Colombians made money on product. Italians made money on distribution. System worked because it acknowledged who controlled what. But late 1987, Medellín Cartel decided they didn't need Italians. They had product, pilots, boats. Why split New York profits with middlemen when they could sell directly to streets? Carlos Mendoza, 41, was Medellín lieutenant operating Miami. Job expanding American distribution. He'd been watching Italian families take their cut and doing math. If cartels selling kilo to Italians for 40,000 and Italians selling on New York streets for 80,000, that was 40,000 profit, Italians taking just for distribution. Multiply by 100 kilos monthly, 4 million going to middlemen. Mendoza thought he could cut them out. Recruited team of Colombian and Dominican street dealers in New York. Set up safe houses Washington Heights and Bronx. Started flying cocaine directly to small airfields New Jersey and upstate, bypassing Miami to New York route. Italians controlled. Dealers sold directly to customers at prices 20% below Italian operations. No middleman fees, no tribute, pure profit to Colombia. Operation worked beautifully 6 months. Mendoza moved 200 kilos monthly through New York network. At street prices, 16 million gross revenue monthly. Colombians making money they'd previously split with Italians. Street dealers making money because better prices on product. Everyone happy except people who actually controlled New York drug distribution. By January 1988, Gambino captains reporting something wrong. Street dealers who usually bought from Gambino buying elsewhere. Prices dropping because someone flooding market with cheaper product. Revenue from cocaine, which had been growing, suddenly plateaued and declined. Investigation found source. Colombians operating independent distribution network, selling directly to streets, bypassing Italian families entirely. Captains wanted immediate violent response, but situation complicated. This wasn't small-time criminals. This was Medellín Cartel, most powerful drug organization in world. They had resources, political connections, reputation for extreme violence. War would be expensive and bloody. Gotti saw it differently. Colombians made business mistake. Thought controlling product meant controlling market. But markets require infrastructure, distribution networks, political protection, corrupt cops, money laundering systems, safe houses, reliable dealers, protection from competition. Italian families built that in New York over decades. Colombians using it without paying. That was theft of services, and like any theft required consequences. But instead of war, Gotti wanted meeting. Explain to Colombians how New York worked. Make them offer you can sell cocaine in our city, but you pay us for access to infrastructure. Not as middlemen buying and reselling. but enough to acknowledge New York belongs to 5 families and operating requires permission and payment. Getting meeting required diplomacy. Sent intermediaries, people working both worlds. Message delivered carefully. John Gotti requests meeting with Medellín Cartel representatives to discuss business arrangements regarding cocaine distribution in New York. No threats, just invitation to discuss mutual interests. Colombians initially confused. Why meet when successfully operating without them? But brokers explained reality. Italians controlled New York at levels Colombians didn't see. Police relationships, political connections, union access, money laundering, protection from federal investigations. Gambino could make life very difficult. Meeting was civilized way to settle. Mendoza consulted Colombia. They authorized meeting but told him make clear. Cartel wasn't interested in old system of selling through Italian middlemen. If meeting about demanding stop, answer was no. Meeting set Wednesday evening, February 1988. Colombian restaurant, Jackson Heights, Queens. Neutral ground in neighborhood with large Colombian population. Restaurant closed for private event. Gotti arrived with Sammy Gravano and 2 captains. Mendoza arrived with 3 top New York distributors, 2 Colombians, 1 Dominican running street level. Everyone armed but nobody stupid enough to shoot in public restaurant. Sat at back table. 2 groups sized each other up. Gotti in tailored suit, diamond ring, slicked hair. Italian-American organized crime epitome. Mendoza in expensive casual style gold chains, designer clothes, Colombian drug money flash. 2 criminal organizations, 2 cultures, finding common ground over who controlled cocaine distribution in biggest city in America. Gotti spoke first. Mr. Mendoza, thank you for meeting. I understand your organization operating in New York about 6 months. Successful operation, moving significant product, making good money. But we have problem we need to address. Mendoza's English good heavy accent. What problem? Problem is you've been operating in New York without making arrangements with families that control this city, selling cocaine on streets that belong to us, using infrastructure we built, operating without permission and without paying for privilege. That needs to change. We're not using your infrastructure. We have own distribution network, own dealers, own supply chain, not taking anything from Italian families. You're using our city, our streets, selling to customers in neighborhoods we control, laundering money through businesses we allow to operate, benefiting from political and police relationships we cultivated that keep drug enforcement manageable. All of that is infrastructure. Just because you brought own dealers doesn't mean you're not using our systems. Mendoza leaned back. In Miami, Louisiana, Houston, we operate independently. Don't pay Italian families. Why should New York be different? Because New York is different. In Miami you control ports and distribution. LA you have own networks. Houston, different situation. But New York controlled by 5 families since before cocaine was major business. Every criminal operation here, gambling, loan sharking, prostitution, drugs, operates with our permission or faces consequences. That's reality of how organized crime works in New York. We have commission that coordinates between families, prevents wars, maintains stability. That stability makes New York profitable for everyone. When you operate without acknowledging system, you threaten stability. So what are you proposing? We go back to selling through your middlemen and give up half our profits? No. I understand why you wanted to cut out middlemen. You have product, want to maximize profit. I respect that. But here's proposal. You continue operating your direct distribution network. Keep your dealers, supply chain, pricing, but you pay us distribution tax for operating in New York, $100,000 per month, not for product, not for middlemen services, for access to infrastructure that makes it possible to sell cocaine in New York without being shut down immediately. $100,000 per month, that's over $1 million per year. It's 10% of what you're probably making in New York monthly. If you're moving 200 kilos through city at street prices, you're grossing well over $1 million per month. We're asking 10% as territory tax. In exchange you get first, official permission to operate from Gambino and other families. You're not competition. You're authorized operation. Second, protection from other organizations trying to move into your territory or undercut prices. We make sure no other Colombian or other cartels compete with you. Third, access to our political and police relationships. When you have law enforcement problems, we can help manage. When you need money laundering services, we provide connections. When you need union labor for transportation, we can arrange. You're not just paying permission, you're paying for services making operation more profitable and secure. Mendoza considered organization making approximately 16 million gross monthly in New York, after costs, netting 6 to 8 million monthly, paying 100,000, even 1.2 million yearly, was significant but manageable if meant operating with official sanction instead of facing organized opposition. And if we refuse, continue operating independently, then we make it expensive to do business in New York. We have NYPD relationships you don't. We can have safe houses raided, dealers arrested, shipments intercepted. We can tell our street people to identify your distributors to law enforcement. We make it so risky and costly to operate that you'd spend more defending operation than you'd make in profit. We can also reach out to other cartels, Cali, other organizations, and offer them same arrangement. Make them authorized distributors. Suddenly you're not just fighting us, you're fighting competitors we're backing. You can work with us and pay reasonable fee, or fight us and spend more money with less security, and eventually lose access to New York market entirely. Mendoza looked at distributors, conferred quietly in Spanish, turned back to Gotti. I need to discuss with superiors in Colombia. Not decision I can make alone. Understood. Take 48 hours. But understand during those hours your operation continues at our discretion. We could shut it down tonight. Fact we're having this conversation instead of taking direct action is us showing respect and offering business solution. Don't mistake patience for weakness. I understand. I'll have answer in 2 days. Stood. Shook hands carefully. Meeting over. Mendoza returned to Miami, spoke with cartel superiors via secure phone. Explained Gotti's proposal. Cartel leadership debated. Some wanted refuse on principle. They didn't answer to Italian mobsters. Others saw business logic. 100,000 monthly manageable. If it meant operating with protection instead of fighting 5 families, probably worth it. They understood Gotti's threat wasn't empty. Italian families did have political and police connections Colombians lacked. Making operation too risky would hurt profits more than paying tax. 48 hours later, Mendoza called intermediary. Cartel accepted Gotti's terms. 100,000 monthly for authorized distribution rights in New York. Arrangement began following week. Colombians continued direct distribution network, dealers, supply chain pricing, but now made monthly cash payments to Gambino representatives. 100,000 cash delivered first week each month. In exchange got what Gotti promised. When rival Dominican organization tried moving into Washington Heights competing with Medellín network, Gambino enforcers shut them down within 2 weeks. When DEA investigated Colombian money laundering, Gambino lawyers provided connections to better systems and political pressure helped slow investigation. When Colombians needed union labor to transport shipments through New York ports, Gambino provided access. Relationship worked because both sides got what needed. Colombians got to operate profitable direct distribution. Gambino family got monthly revenue for authorizing operation in their territory. Arrangement continued successfully until 1991,
when federal law enforcement DEA and FBI launched massive investigation into Colombian cocaine trafficking, disrupting operations nationwide. Several of Mendoza's key distributors arrested. Medellín Cartel itself began fracture under pressure from Colombian government and rival but for 3 years monthly payment system worked exactly as negotiated. Colombians paid approximately $3.6 million total to Gambino family for privilege of selling cocaine in New York, and template established that foreign drug organizations could operate in New York but had to acknowledge 5 families' territorial authority and pay for access became standard practice. When Cali Cartel later wanted New York distribution after Medellín's decline, made similar arrangements. When Mexican cartels began expanding north in 1990s, learned same lesson. New York wasn't free market, it was controlled market, and controlling it required either being part of 5 families or paying them for permission. For Gotti, Colombian arrangement proved same principle demonstrated with Russians in Brighton Beach and Yakuza on West Coast. You don't need to control every aspect of operation to profit from it, just need to control territory where it happens. Colombians had cocaine, they had suppliers, transportation dealers, but they didn't have New York. Gambino family had New York, and in criminal economics, controlling territory more valuable than controlling product, because product always needs somewhere to be sold. That's leverage. Colombians could have refused and fought, would have lost eventually, because Italian families had deeper political connections and better understanding of operating in New York specifically. Or they could accept business reality that operating in someone else's territory costs money and pay fee to operate peacefully and profitably. They chose smart option. That's why arrangement worked. That's why both organizations made money instead of fighting war. And that's why when other cartels looked at entering New York market, they learned from Colombian example, asked permission first, negotiate fair terms and pay your territory tax. Because cost of fighting 5 families for New York was always going to be more expensive than just paying them for access. Carlos Mendoza understood that after one meeting, and John Gotti proved once again that real power in organized crime isn't about having biggest or most product. It's about controlling places where business happens and making everyone who wants to do business there acknowledge that control with cash